Welcome to Suits on Suits, the show where Jared and I, two practicing lawyers and brothers, give our takes on the show Suits.
On this episode, we're going to cover insider trading, LSAT tips, and the role of a managing partner. Stick around to the end, and Quinn and I will debate Rachel's reaction to Mike's big lie.
Little lie.
We'll decide.
Maybe a big lie that has no consequence on Rachel is maybe my position there.
Yeah, stick around.
Stick around. This is season 1, episode 6. And in this episode, Harvey and Mike ultimately work together to defend a woman who they believe has been falsely accused of insider trading.
Yeah, well, Mike definitely believes initially. Harvey comes around to it.
Yeah. The ultimately was chosen with care there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Mike tries to hide his secret about getting paid to take the LSAT, not LSATs, for other people from Rachel after volunteering to help her study for the exam. So, Jared, do you have an alternative title for this episode?
I do. Although,
what is the title, actually?
Yeah. I was going to say the real title for this episode was Tricks of the Trade, which I actually think is a good title.
Yeah, it's a great title.
Like no notes on that one, so I kind of
I've got one note.
Okay, give me it.
Tips of the trade.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I kind of like tricks better because it is a trick, and they're talking about kind of the trick on the LSAT front, but I guess it could be tips. But
yeah.
No, I think it's a trick. I think trick's better. So my alternative title is Insiders, just full
Insiders.
stop.
Yeah,
So let me give you the background. So
okay.
Lewis is invited to the inside by Jessica. She takes him out. Rachel figures out Mike's little secret, so she's on the inside. Mike is getting closer to Harvey, and Harvey's trusting him more, it seems. I think that's a progression along the entire show. And of course, there's insider trading.
I like that, and I think anytime there's so many tie-ins to a title, I'll give it some points. I stand by tips of the trade for two reasons.
Okay.
So I think tricks of the trade is such a common phrase that tweaking it slightly and personalizing it for the specific show.
Not copyrightable.
Yeah.
No, sorry, not trademarkable.
Yeah. So tips of the trade, I think, hits that point better.
I get it.
And I refuse to agree with the fact that tricks is as descriptive as tips here. We're talking stock tips. We're talking about tips on the LSAT.
Okay, fair. So you had a slight note. You basically took their title and refined it.
So in my notes as we were watching this, I put this is more of an edit than an alt title.
Okay, yeah, I get it. And like I said, I think their title is pretty good. So
yeah. This is a great title.
Yeah. Okay, with that, let's start talking hot takes. Do you have any hot takes for this episode?
Well, I guess I previewed it in the intro, but it's the LSAT, not LSATs. I was going crazy. They must have said it 50 times in this episode.
But you see it in shows and movies. People say the SATs as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a similar construct.
Well, in that
similar
one,
mistake, I guess.
Totally. That one, I don't know why I'm more familiar with hearing SATs.
Because more common.
Yeah, I guess it's
in
more
the general
common
population.
Yeah. I've never heard anybody in a law school setting say LSATs. I don't think I've heard it once.
I've definitely heard it in the general population whenever they're talking. A non-lawyer's talking about it. But
okay.
But either way, it is jarring. Yeah,
it was jarring. It kind of reminded me of like whenever people say like caramel instead of caramel.
Oh, you're going to start an online debate here, Quinn.
Or like, kitty corner.
What hill is Quinn going to die on?
Kitty corner versus like catty corner.
But that's not.
Those are regional differences.
Those are regional. Yeah, pop versus soda. Those are regional differences. If you look on a map, they could show you where you're from.
It made me think about that. This was far more jarring, where it's like it just felt wrong, and it felt like it was something that they just said with such conviction. And if they said it wrong once, you're like, oh, somebody misspoke.
Yeah.
To say it wrong this many times with that much conviction, it took me out of the scene.
Yeah, I wonder, as the lawyer took you out of the scene, I wonder who kind of fell. I wonder if it was a choice or if the writer just had no idea.
Yeah.
All right, so I have two.
Yeah.
My first one is, I don't think Mike should have been given so much crap for not watching Gabby Stone. I mean, she's an adult, and like, what authority does Mike have to to restrain her movements. like
To just imprison.
I was like, I think the junior associates should have studied criminal law section of the bar exam a bit harder. They missed the section on false imprisonment.
I meanwhile, it was like Harvey is being so forgiving and throughout has been so forgiving to Mike. This one, you're spot on.
Yeah. He has no authority to physically challenge her movement. So like, what is he going to just walk down the sidewalk? She's an adult. It does also show like they're kind of mixing together Harvey being we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but Harvey being the prosecutor and I guess also the law enforcement officer is going to take her to the jail. Like that's not how this works.
Yeah, I was curious to get your take on that. How he's negotiating this deal.
Well, let's say that for the general discussion. But I think I do think it's this crossover that he's like the judicial branch, the prosecutor, the judicial branch, and the execution or the executive branch, where he's like also the police officer enforcing her confinement.
Yeah.
So that's number one.
All right, give me your second one.
The second one is, I think Gabby Stone should have absolutely demanded her bonus. I like at the end.
She had it coming.
For sure. What was she even like? Even if you were to just take a step back and say, why were they giving her the bonus? It wasn't for the trade. It was to kind of keep her happy and keep her quiet. She went along with it, was going to freaking jail, and then somehow the attorneys for the firm, solved her problem for her. So like, and if anything, $300K seems small in retrospect.
She needs to talk to a good employment lawyer on top of a criminal defense attorney.
Agreed.
All right, so let's dive in. What'd you think of the episode?
So I thought this one was entertaining. I mean, I find all these entertaining, but I think the three different storylines working together that were quite discreet. Like there's kind of there's the legal case going on. There's some backstory around Mike and Rachel and like, well, won't they, but also Mike's issues around him faking it are popping up, which is entertaining. And then like, as much as I think it's hard to like Lewis, he's like such a heel. Like I felt like he was due the tickets to the show. Like I thought that the interaction was like actually made sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, he's a really important part of the firm and we'll get to this again later, but Jessica mentions that, she mentions as much and is Harvey, has he cemented himself above Lewis in the hierarchy, at least for the time being? But yeah, I think that we've talked about how competent and capable Lewis is. And it's interesting to see that dynamic shake out.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure. Before we were talking about seeing Harvey vulnerable and having that character develop in a way where he's not just this superhero. I'm kind of loving Harvey as a superhero.
I agree. I think his vulnerability comes in his forgiveness.
Yeah. And I think you could title this whole season to date, like finding Harvey's humanity. We're seeing this trend where he starts off with this tough exterior and then he softens throughout.
Yeah. He has a lot of forgiveness. He's a lot of flexibility. Like, he's not being a total jerk. Even though Mike's letting him down.
Let's talk about insider trading, and I would like to learn a little bit more about it.
Before we dive into the kind of case that in the story arc here from this episode, I'm going to dive in and give kind of an explainer of what insider trading is. So it's a 5-factor test. It occurs when a person or entity trades in any security, which security is a term of art, on the basis of, that's number 2, which is also a term of art. And number 3 is material. Number 4 is non-public information. And number 5 is which has been obtained in a breach of a duty of trust or confidence.
And so can we quickly break those points down?
Yeah, absolutely. So security, while that has been a topic in vogue for the SEC generally because of cryptocurrencies and the like, in a lot of these circumstances, we're not actually talking about, is it a security, is it not a security? A stock on a public market is a security. So I think we can kind of brush over that one. Trading on the basis of, this one's interesting because the person has to be aware of the material non-public information at the time the person purchased or sold the security. Arguably, Gabby, for example, isn't aware that she's trading on non-public information, right? Like that's something that, because it was the manager who gave her this tip sheet, she thought she had the same tip sheet as everyone else, and then she trades on it. At the time she's making the trade, she doesn't know about the insider information that the manager had received from an attorney.
That's a really important distinction here. You could be trading because of the information, but all 5 of these points are terms of art to varying degrees. And for the second prong, it sounds like you have to be aware that this was non-public.
A person traded on this basis if the person was aware of the material non-public information at the time the person purchased or sold the security.
That makes sense, because you have to have an awareness prong somewhere here, and so they're slotting that under the second.
Yeah, exactly. Like trading on the basis of, I'm sure, could trip up a lot of people on whether or not that information was the information that pushed them over the edge to trade. Like that's clearly something that falls within this prong, but also being aware of it falls under this prong.
Okay.
The third prong is kind of determining that the information is material. Information is material if there is a substantial likelihood that a reasonable investor would consider it important in making an investment decision. So, go ahead.
Well, so we see material a lot in the law. You see the term material, and I guess regardless of, let's abstract it from this setting for a moment.
Absolutely.
It just means it's significant, right? So as opposed to something that's like de minimis or trivial, it's material simply means significant.
It's based on what a reasonable investor would determine as material. Would a reasonable investor, which is kind of a proxy for what they're going to judge you against, would they consider that information to be material?
So let me give 2 hypotheticals.
Yeah.
The board plans on ousting the CEO and bringing in somebody new.
Yep.
Non-public, meets all the other prongs. Material? Surely, right?
Surely material.
So another example, this is non-public, meets all the other prongs. There's going to be an expansion of their existing office space that they're leased by 1%.
Probably not material.
Probably not material. It could be some reason it is material, but it's not. I guess the only point I'm trying to tease out here is you could know something about the company that meets all the other prongs,
Yep.
and this just says it has to be significant.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a fair kind of proxy here for what material means in this context.
Okay, so for non-public information, is this exactly what it sounds like, or is there something more here?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar to what it sounds like. It's information that has not been disseminated broadly to investors in the marketplace. One way to kind of think about this, has the information been made available to the general public through the media or in public disclosure documents filed with the SEC? What they're trying to see is, has this information already been in the general public enough to already influence the price of the stock, right? Like investors who are trading and creating the pricing for the stock, is this information already being taken into consideration?
And so if it's on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, obviously,
yes.
Do we see situations where it is kind of on the line here, or for the most part, if it's...
I think it's hard to... I'm sure that this is litigated to some degree. My guess, though, is in most cases, most clear-cut insider trading cases, this is totally a guess, but is this question isn't as important as the final point, which is talking about, did someone breach their duty of trust or confidence?
So break this one down for us.
Yeah. So I think the next one is like, and this is really getting to who is an insider, like who broke. So, it's not expressly defined by the securities law or the SEC, but it has been construed by courts to refer to a person or an entity that by virtue of a fiduciary relationship with an issuer of securities has knowledge of or access to material non-public information.
What would be the consequence if somebody simply overheard somebody having a conversation?
Well,
so let's say somebody has no affiliation to the organization. They work for a private trash company.
I think you're getting into a different concept. So maybe before we get into that, because I think that's a good question, but it's, if you have a duty, then you, such as like a director or an employee or an officer of a company, and you use that access to material non-public information to make trades on that security, that would almost certainly be problematic, right? There's also this construct, if you get the information from someone who has a duty of confidentiality or a fiduciary duty to the issuer, and they pass that information along, and you're aware that in giving you that information it was a breach of their fiduciary duty, then there could be tipper-tippee liability, which isn't just for the insider making the trade. It's kind of a derivative concept from of insider trading, where you receive the information from someone who breached their fiduciary duty or duty of confidentiality. So in that circumstance, if you just overheard it and it truly was overhearing it, there's an argument to be made that you weren't a part of that chain of someone breaching their non-public information. Oh, I guess another piece of this is oftentimes the tipper has to receive some material benefit from giving you that information. So if you're just overhearing someone, breach their fiduciary confidentiality,
so my understanding is that is generally speaking,
yes,
that is not insider trading.
It
could be corporate espionage. You could be committing fraud or violating any number of privacy laws. But if it really was, you just happened to overhear something, it might be regulated by other legal rules,
yes,
but it's not insider trading.
Traditionally speaking, that isn't insider trading. All of this is facts and circumstances.
Absolutely.
Contingent. So I wouldn't, say any of these things flatly, but I would say
don't just start eavesdropping and think that you have carte blanche access to this.
Yeah, exactly. But that kind of break in the line of information changes the relationship from potentially being an insider trading violation to one that probably is not.
Yeah.
But if your husband or wife is the CEO of a company and you find out that the company wasn't going to get some kind of FDA approval that the marketplace thought was going to happen, and you traded in that company's stock, you sold a bunch of stock to save some losses, you knew or should have known that they had an obligation to not share that information with the public, and you took that information and traded on that information. Yeah,
and I think a common misconception oftentimes in law is that if you do these things in a really cute way,
yes, you
can avoid liability. Typically not true. So it's like they don't have to necessarily prove during this conversation you gained this material non-public information and then traded on it.
Yeah.
If you're in a position where you knew or should have known or had access to this information, there's a good chance you're going to end up having liability.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I think about it.
Yeah.
So now that we kind of laid out the construct here, why don't we, jump in and talk about Gabby Stone, who's a very likable defendant.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're introduced to Gabby in the conference room. She's sitting across from Harvey. He's about to put her to negotiate a deal where she's going to have to go to prison for 11 months.
Yeah,
a little
that's
under
right.
A year. Across the table from her, he's asking her to thank him for getting her a plea deal that puts her in jail for 11 months. What are your thoughts around how he's negotiating on behalf of the DOJ in this kind of construct?
I don't pretend to know what normal sentences are for insider trading. I think the idea of at one point 7 years is mentioned.
Whoa.
Going to jail for 7 years for insider trading seems out of line, I guess.
That seems excessive.
Seems excessive, but to thank anybody for an 11-month prison sentence, I think is the bigger point here.
Yeah.
No fucking shot.
Yeah, no. It seems aggressive.
Fundamentally, there's a conflict of interest here.
For sure.
Negotiating on behalf of somebody else while his clients have a direct interest in the outcome.
Agreed. I think the interesting thing too is I'm not exactly sure why he's in the room at that point. If they've isolated it to not charging the firm or anyone else at the firm for the insider trading violation, and they've purely isolated to the trader, it seems kind of odd that the firms, even like Harvey's client, is even in the conversation.
At this point, would no longer be part of the conversations, assuming that they decided that his clients weren't involved in this. He would no longer be part of the conversation. And I think it's worth mentioning that this isn't how prosecutors work, or certainly not how they should work.
Yeah.
The idea isn't we need somebody to pin this on, so you two negotiate amongst each other.
Yeah,
let's find a culprit.
Yeah.
I think most prosecutors are trying to get at the truth.
Yes.
And so it's not like, well, if you can't pin this on Gabby, then, you're back in the conversation.
Yeah.
Not even close.
No, I mean, if the firm or actors in the firm violated insider trading laws then I think the prosecutor would say, let's prosecute all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This brought up another topic here where we're talking about insider trading, and then they mentioned, I think rightly, two governmental bodies here.
Yeah.
The DOJ, or the Department of Justice, and the SEC, or the Security Exchange Commission.
Yep.
What's the difference between these two bodies?
I think the difference in this circumstance is really around what kind of liability both can bring. So the SEC is going to be bringing a civil case for damages, monetary damages, and the DOJ is going to be bringing a criminal case for potentially some kind of jail time, as we're talking about with Gabby.
Yeah, and so Harvey mentions this at one point where he's saying that the SEC decided not to pursue this, and they have a lower burden of proof, which is exactly right. There's typically speaking, whenever you're bringing a civil case for money or monetary damages, the burden of proof is going to be lower than in a criminal case where your liberty is on the line, and so you'd potentially be imprisoned. And the philosophy there is, in the U.S. we've decided better for 10 guilty people to go free than one innocent person be imprisoned. Or probably no need to quantify that, but that's the general idea.
If it's my personal liberty at stake, I would very much like the government to have a higher bar.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's such an enormous injustice.
Yes, if it's wrong. We leave the boardroom, and Mike has some very strong feelings that Gabby's innocent. After she leaves, she's found at the hedge fund digging through, I guess the to-be shredded
sheets.
Yeah, the to-be shredded tip sheets that they shred every evening. Mike gets a conscience around Gabby and thinks, let's dig a little deeper. And Harvey's hesitant at first.
Very hesitant. I think he effectively says, not my client, not my problem.
Yeah. Which there's something right there.
Yeah.
His obligation is only to the client. And then he kind of creates a narrative arc that allows him to say it is his problem because it is his client, which is this is going to bring down his client. Yeah.
If they're engaging in insider trading,
or there's a bad actor that's not being prosecuted, rooted out.
Yeah. But I think the philosophy behind not my client, not my problem, whether or not you subscribe to that, I think there is a strong defense of that position.
Yeah. Ethical
defense of that position. Gets much more complicated though whenever you have negotiated that person's plea deal.
Suspend your disbelief.
Well, whenever they de facto become their client.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mike's coming to Gabby's defense. Harvey's slow to come around, but he eventually comes around and says that they meet Gabby in prison, and he says, you don't have to like me, but our interests are aligned right now. Let's talk.
And then they continue to root out Mike and Harvey do their due diligence, and they're talking to the manager of the trading floor. They're, the boiler room, as they call it. They're talking to I don't know if he's like the head of trading or second in command VP, something like that, for the hedge fund. And Harvey susses out that he's not giving the full information on all their trades. And so then Mike goes to the bar to basically they're going to cross-reference the trades that they got from the second in command against the biggest winning trades that the traders have made over the last year, 2 years, whatever. And Mike's going to do that by talking to the traders at the bar.
Yeah. And all of the biggest wins that they've had are left off of the sheet of trades that the second in command gives to Harvey.
Yeah.
And so immediately
every single one. So you're like, okay, this is problem.
Yes, something's going on. Yeah. Still an open question as to what, but something's happening. Ultimately, we figure out what's going on. They're making these trades that they're getting non-public information, and they're making trades, but everybody else is flown under the radar because they're trading for less than $10 million. All these trades are being made at roughly $9 million. Gabby makes a $10 million trade, I believe, maybe 10 plus.
Yeah.
She's trying to prove herself. She thinks that this could be a big win. So she goes big on this position.
I doubt that there's like a hard line for what size trades the SEC or DOJ reviews, but there is a practical reality that they can only review so much data at any given time. That changes significantly with the advent of computers.
Is there going to be this clean floor where they review nothing below $10 million?
No, or else you just spread out your insider information across.
Of course. Yeah. But to your point, there is something realistic to the fact that there are limited resources. They're going to go after things that seem the most suspicious. Yeah. And it's like big trades on positions that have large outsized returns.
That are anomalies.
Yes. That's what's going to trigger the most scrutiny.
Exactly. And ironically, now they have these massive like trading databases and supercomputers at the SEC and DOJ that can like really suss out anomalies pretty quickly. At least that's my understanding. I've never seen one. But yeah.
Okay, so we set up the 5-factor test. You broke it down for us. Is this insider trading?
Yeah, I mean, obviously all things are facts and circumstance based, but
Jared with the caveats today, right and left.
Oh god. Okay, so
I was worried you're coming for him.
First factor, is it a security? Clearly security. Yes. We're talking to public company stock on the basis of, obviously there's an argument that I think is a strong argument. She wasn't aware of the information being insider information. She was trading off a tip sheet. Like, what's on the tip sheet, right? Do we know, is the tip sheet saying the information that was insider information, or is it just saying buy this stock? If it's the latter, then I think it's, maybe fails this prong of the 5-factor test.
Yeah, I thought a lot about that second one, and I think that what is on the tip sheet is really important. Also, their instructions and their context around how they're supposed to engage with the tip sheet.
Yeah.
Is the tip sheet something that's like, to your point, is it a recommendation? What's their understanding of the actions that the analysts have taken to generate the tip sheet? Is it just hey, something to look into versus...
Well, there's a lot of factual discovery in this prong if you were making a case against Gabby.
Yeah.
To understand what is involved factually in that.
If she is just given the name of a stock and the idea is these stocks could be like interesting stocks to consider trading for the day, I think it fails right there.
Yeah, agreed. I guess that also kind of dumbs down what trading is, because if you're being given a tip sheet to okay, buy this stock, then it's like
stocks.
Then why even tell someone? Just have a computer do it?
Totally.
We find out that the lawyer got the information, or there's some connection between the second in command and the lawyer for the law firm who represented them in an FDA application, I think. That the lawyer has a duty of confidentiality to his client, and if he passed along information to the second in command at this hedge fund, that he definitely is breaching his duty of trust. And I think that you would argue that the second in command was aware, knew, or should have known that was a breach of the information.
Yeah, and so I think the lawyer and the second in command are, based on these facts and the assumptions we're making here, are clearly insider trading.
I would argue that the lawyer with his duty of confidentiality and the manager knowing that the lawyer had an obligation of confidentiality, they're probably going to fail this 5-factor test.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think Gabby not knowing where the information came from and just assuming that her employer gave her that information or the tip sheet was found legally, I think it's a harder argument to make against Gabby.
I think that's right. I think the case against Gabby is actually a really hard case to bring.
Yeah, I think so. And ultimately, that's what the show comes to the same conclusion.
Yeah, I think that's right. Let's dive into the LSAT. So what is the LSAT? It's the law school admissions test. It's scored on a scale of 120 to 180, with the median score sitting around 153. And it's one of what I would characterize as 3 parts of your law school admissions packet that are going to be evaluated.
Agreed.
So you've got the LSAT, which is, again, this admissions test, your undergraduate GPA, and everything else.
Yeah.
So whenever I say everything else, that includes your personal statements, your letters of rec.
It's not that dissimilar from your package you're going to use to apply to undergraduate.
Yeah.
Degree.
Yeah, pretty similar. And so breaking these down in terms of importance, assign some rough percentage. We're not going to hold you to it, but like, how important do you think each one is?
So I think it's school by school, but I think a lot of the highest ranking law schools would put the LSAT 40, 50% of your total package, if not more than that. I think it's by far, or I think it is the most important.
So you think the LSAT's the most important, and then give us some rough divide.
So then I would say GPA is probably, so if it's 40% for the LSAT, 40% for the GPA, and 20% for everything else, or it could even be 50% for the LSAT, 40 for the GPA, and 10 for everything else.
I think, so that's roughly right, in my opinion. So how much everything else matters is going to be pretty school dependent. And I think that you can really excel in, bat outside of your scores if you have something exceptional there.
Yeah. If you can tell a good story.
Yeah. And I think that if your LSAT and your GPA are great and you're struggling with admissions,
yep,
there was probably something that was overlooked in this section. So I think the everything else category is as for a wild card factor where you can really bat beyond your stats, or it can truly be the reason you don't get into a school where you're otherwise qualified.
Yeah, it's very important, I guess is the way to surmise it.
But for most people who are somewhere in the middle, like decent letters of rec, there's a personal statement that they're, it's thoughtful, but they're not talking about their 4 years as some Olympic athlete,
Yeah, exactly. Not all of us can be Rhodes scholars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are calculators here that tease out how important GPA is and how important your LSAT score is for particular schools. And for some schools, your GPA is arguably more important. For others, your LSAT is going to be more important.
Now, are those calculators publicly available, and or are they from the schools? Or are they from other?
So there's one that I believe is put out by LSAC, which is the organization that administers the LSAT test. The punchline is your LSAT is at least the second most important part of your application, and probably the single most important part of your application. Okay. And the reason we really emphasize that is because there's so much you can do to improve your score, and you can improve your score over time. We're talking, many weeks or months here.
Yeah.
But over the span of, let's say, 4 months.
I was going to say, how long would you suggest someone who's interested in law school, like how long would you suggest that they set aside, they're signing up for the test. What test should they sign up for? How many months should they give themselves to study?
Regarding how much time to spend on the LSAT, this is going to depend on how much time you have available. I think that's the reality of the situation. I've seen people rush to take it, and they take it almost as an afterthought.
Yeah.
They spend 4 years trying really hard in college, working really hard to get the best grades they can, and then they take the LSAT towards the end of their college experience. And again, as a bit of an afterthought, whenever it's arguably the most important thing. And you're talking about, yes, you need to do well in college, but it's 4 years of effort, hard work. Whereas, maybe 4 months of really dedicated work could dramatically improve your score. Let's quickly break down the test before we dive into a couple.
Yeah, why don't you give us a breakdown? Because when you and I took it, it was different than it is today.
Yeah, so there are currently 4 multiple choice sections, 3 of which are graded, and then there's an ungraded experimental multiple choice question.
Got it.
There's also an ungraded writing sample at the end of the exam. Okay, so for the graded sections, there are currently 2 logical reasoning sections and 1 reading comprehension section. Prior to August 2024, there used to be an analytical reasoning section that was commonly referred to as logic games. So for better or worse, that's no longer on the exam. The show mentions that you're going to need 170 to get into Harvard Law School. Currently, the average LSAT score at Harvard Law School is a 174.
It's a very high score.
Very high score. It's the 99th percentile.
Yep.
170 puts you at roughly the 96th percentile, also a very high score. And I guess just for a little more context, a 160 puts you at the 75th percentile. I think a 170 puts you in the range. It puts you in the running at any school.
Agreed. Yeah. You have to have a complete application. But plenty of kids are going to get in with a 170.
Yeah. Let's talk about tips to success on the exam.
Okay. What do you got?
Yeah. So I've mentioned it above, but my single biggest tip is to give yourself plenty of time to study.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think plenty of time to study and do practice tests.
Well, and so I've got 2 more tips.
Oh, sorry.
No. That's a great one. I think take as many practice tests as you can and do as many practice problems as you can.
Yeah, agreed.
You're going to have to recognize these patterns and recognize them quickly. The best way to do that is to work tons of problems.
Yep.
To that end, I would recommend signing up for a free account on Law Hub, which is run through LSAC. They've got a bunch of free materials on there.
That's nice.
This isn't a sponsored plug. It's a place where you can start for free. After that, if they don't have all the questions available, I recommend buying some materials where you can get access to every single question and answer that's been published.
Oh my gosh. That's great. Honestly, I would be as exhaustive as possible on any public information that they have.
And so this comes up on the show where Rachel's a bit of a perfectionist. I think that so many people have this tendency.
Yeah.
Start taking practice questions before you feel ready.
Yeah.
And go back and forth between practice questions and studying theory. Once you get, you're struggling with a certain type of practice problem, go to the theory on it.
And this is coming from a kid or a grown adult man.
Depending on who you ask.
Yeah, depending on who you ask. Who did well enough on the MCAT as well as the LSAT to teach it. So Quinn has a little bit of experience in teaching a graduate level standardized test.
Yeah, that's true. Not the LSAT though.
I know. Interestingly enough.
Go back and forth between studying theory and just working problems. You're going to feel uncomfortable working the problems at first, and you're going to get tons of problems wrong. As a matter of fact, I would actually recommend starting with a practice test. Start with an old practice test, work it all the way through, probably not under timed conditions.
I probably wouldn't do it under time either.
Get a feel for what the test is like.
And what your strengths and weaknesses
and
are.
what your strengths and weaknesses are. Get that baseline, and then go back and forth between theory and questions until you've done thousands of questions.
Yeah.
And then save a handful of tests, particularly the most recent test, and do them under timed conditions throughout your studying.
Totally agree.
And as you get closer to the exam, you should, in the last, let's say, 2 weeks, you should probably take 3 or 4 exams under time conditions. Finally, retaking the test. So I think a lot of people end up scoring below their potential on the first test. I think that's actually true for a lot of people on the second or maybe even the third time they take it. I think the general philosophy in my advice here on retaking the exam is approach the first time you're taking it as if it's going to be the one and only time you're taking it. So don't take it until you're ready.
Yeah.
To the extent you can postpone, if you're not ready, sign up for a date when you think you can realistically be ready.
Yeah.
Don't take it with the idea of like, we'll see what happens.
Yes.
If you have this luxury, take it early enough where you have a chance to retake it.
Yeah.
I guess to wrap this up, there are 3 takeaways here. 1, spend significant time studying. Give yourself a few months. 2, work thousands of practice problems. Start taking practice problems before you think you're ready. And 3, to the extent you can, give yourself time to retake the test if you need to. So take it early enough to retake it.
I think it's great advice. So I think that takes us to our final plot point here, which is talking about a managing partner's relationship with the various partners at the firm.
How realistic was this dynamic?
There's a point at the dinner between Lewis and Jessica where Jessica says, Harvey may be a more important partner to the firm than you are at the moment, but you're very important. And I kind of think that's generally the theme across any partnership. There may be partners who have a bigger impact on the firm's revenue. There may be partners who have a bigger impact on the firm's recruiting arm. There may be partners who have, are the most technical lawyers at the firm. Everyone has a role, and it's the managing partner's job to keep all of these people happy. The way a lot of people think about the law firm is it's a bunch of fiefdoms, a bunch of small businesses, each of these partners representing the small businesses together as a single ship kind of rowing in the same direction, if I could mix 25 metaphors. Yeah. Lewis is very important to the firm, and I think Jessica's making that known, and I think that's a pretty realistic relationship there.
How often do you have to go see cats as a managing partner?
Ideally, never. To Jessica's point, she was not going to go.
King Lear was enough.
King Lear was... I loved also the fact that Lewis had no idea that this was her... He just kind of whiffed on the social interaction.
Yeah.
Not that surprised.
Go figure.
Yeah, go figure. But she drew the line.
Yeah. You're like, that's enough.
Yeah, exactly.
You're important. You're not important enough for me to go to cats.
Do you think she would have gone had Harvey not egged her on?
No way.
I don't think so either. I think it was like another quiver or arrow in the quiver that was like, I need to show Lewis that he's important in front of Harvey.
Yeah, and then I love the end where Harvey and Lewis are going to a Yankees game, I guess. Yeah,
they gotta bridge the gap. These guys are like at the same firm. They're doing well. This is a great platform for them to do well, and now they're going to the Yankee game.
I want to see what happens there. I guess the only other thing I wanted to touch on, Lewis calls out one of the junior associates for not answering their phone.
Oh, God.
And he goes in way too hard.
It's toxic.
It's incredibly toxic, but I wanted to quickly address accessibility as a junior. I think we might have touched on it before, but break it down.
The reality is it's not a 9-to-5 job. And the reality is there are expectations of being available and being responsive. Without going into and becoming the heel of this show.
I've set Jared up.
Yeah, it is a hard job. And what I think Lewis is trying to get at is it's a hard job. You gotta be available. What he says is incredibly toxic, and I would not support at all.
So what I'm hearing is Jared co-signs Lewis's accessibility comments.
I knew that was going to be the outcome here. Full heel mode.
Yeah. Like, I think Lewis has a point on calling somebody out on answering their phone. That's a really important part of being an attorney, especially a junior attorney, is being accessible.
Yeah, but I think one of the harder...
You can have some boundaries. And
that's what I was going to say. Finding the boundaries is kind of the hardest part.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like finding what the reasonable boundaries are, and what you're managing, who your managing attorney is going to determine what boundaries you can set, because the boundaries are up to you. But whether or not they're going to push those boundaries, finding a place that's not toxic to work at is going to be helpful.
It's an important part of the quest.
I would not be very happy working for someone who said that Lewis's statement exactly to me.
Oh, you wouldn't want to work for Lewis? Here's a quote from this episode. Just because one of your fellow associates is incompetent doesn't mean you have to constantly remind him what a careless idiot he is. I don't want to work for that guy either.
Yeah, he sounds like a jackass. So that brings us to the topic of the debate. Does Rachel have the right to be mad at Mike at the end of this episode?
So I don't think she does.
Well, clearly I do. So give me more.
So what is she mad about?
So I think she's mad because they have a close friendship and relationship. He's omitting facts to her. I think you can talk about at what point does that obligation to tell her that he's, the LSAT taker, what point does that kick in? I don't think it does at the beginning, but I think by the end it definitely does. I think too, Mike's very paternalistic about taking the LSAT, and he's living on his high horse about doing it right. You should be studying for the LSAT. Mike, can help you I can mansplain the LSAT to you. And then Mike is the guy who doesn't do any of this right, including go to law school.
Jared's trying to paint me into the pro mansplaining camp.
Quinn, you're falling in willfully.
Okay, let's start from the premise that this isn't like a trivial thing. It is incredibly unethical to take any exam for somebody else. You clearly should not do that.
Yes, counselor, I agree.
All right, we're on the same page there. So like Mike should not have taken the LSAT for anybody, but this is where he's at. In this situation, I think it puts Rachel in a really bad position if she knows that Mike has taken the exam for other people. I think it puts her in a no-win situation where his misdeeds now create this complicated problem for her where it's like, well, should I tell people about it? Do I have some duty to like disclose this? How do I handle it? And it's not her problem. Mike created this problem and it's his problem to deal with.
Yeah, but do you think that that's why he didn't tell her? Was he thinking about her? Because to me, he's thinking about himself in the entirety, and that's a positive externality of not telling. Yeah,
but I think that regardless of his motivation, I think that she is in a worse position if he tells her.
Yes, I think that I could agree with that argument. I don't think that's the reason he didn't tell her, and I think arguably she's the subordinate. I don't think that the law firm structure is such that all paralegals are subordinates of all attorneys, but I think that she is ostensibly not his manager, so arguably she doesn't have a duty. So let's move on from that.
Duty or no duty, it puts her in a real pickle. If she knows this is not a trivial thing. This is a scandal.
It's absolutely a scandal, but it's a bigger scandal that he didn't go to law school. Okay,
but he shouldn't tell her about that either. It creates a problem for her. If he wants to take ownership of it, I am fully in support of that, but not by offloading this on her.
She's slightly better off.
She's
arguably better off.
I think I'd go as far as to say we both agree that she's in a better position for not knowing this.
We think we both agree that she's arguably better off.
Jared, the caveat king.
Keep going. Make your point with arguably.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. Tell me, your first point is that she feels betrayed that he omitted this information, right?
Yeah, I think it's tightly tied with my second point, which is him living on his high horse about doing things right and studying and that he can help.
What does Mike get out of helping her study for the test? I'll fully concede that he is kind of annoying about this. He is mansplaining. He's
being paternalistic.
He's being paternalistic, but ultimately, I think he is genuinely trying to help her improve her score.
Yeah, but he's interpreting what she actually wants. She hasn't come to him to ask for help. I think my bigger issue is I think he has an altruistic agenda.
What's that agenda?
To try and help her. But she hasn't asked for it. She isn't looking for him to help her out. She's conceded that she doesn't think she's going to go to law school until she decides it's the avenue that she wants to go down. I don't think it's as helpful or as nice as it would otherwise seem. It kind of comes off as paternalistic to me.
So if Rachel is mad at Mike for being paternalistic, that's the only thing that makes sense to me here.
Okay, well, that's one of my points.
Yeah, but if she's mad, as the show seems to suggest, about the omission and about maybe cheating on the LSAT, maybe not even the omission. It could be she's mad about the fact that he cheated on the LSAT.
Well, in case you're wondering, what are we most excited about looking to learning in the next episode? What is Rachel mad about?
Yeah, let's listen to two guys tell you why Rachel's mad.
Exactly.
No, but so we addressed the first point about the omission. I think
that one's a harder argument for me to make. The omission is a very complicated situation. It is his personal life, and there's a lot of liability on his side, and there's a lot of reasons why he would keep it quiet. I think there are a lot of reasons why I actually agree with you that it puts her in somewhat of a pickle to know that information. So to some degree, whether or not that was his motivation or intention, he is potentially saving her from some obligation or some knowledge that if it were known that she knew, could implicate her in
And
malfeasance.
within 30 seconds of her asking, he told her.
Well, with a threat.
Yeah, but he told her within 30 seconds. This wasn't like some long drawn out.
This is like a guy who's like going to jail. Well, yeah, you guys caught me.
Within 30 seconds of her directly asking the question, have you, this is a big question with tons of exposure if he answers it honestly. Regardless of whether or not she says, I could find out, maybe she could, maybe she couldn't. The guy seems to be a good friend of Mike's. Maybe he wouldn't tell her that it was Mike.
Yeah.
Within 30 seconds of her asking.
No. That's where I disagree. She would have absolutely been able to find out because the friend knew Mike. They were in the same testing center and they took the test for each other. So she took the test for Mike and he took the test for the woman. Teresa. And so Teresa knew Mike. She wouldn't have to go through the guy who connected her to Mike.
Maybe she could get to the bottom of this.
She could have. So the threat was real, I think.
Okay, regardless, whenever Mike is confronted, he's honest about this and he doesn't try and lie about it to Rachel.
that much he doesn't. He lies until she threatens him.
How does he lie? He doesn't tell her that he cheated on the LSAT for tons of people.
Fair. It's an omission, but I think
it's absolutely an omission.
I agree with you. Okay.
So he doesn't lie to her about the test. He tries to help her on the exam. If he's helping her without her having asked for it and trying to like push this help upon her, super annoying.
Yes, I'd be pissed about it.
But I don't think that's what she's mad about. I think that she feels betrayed because he's taken the LSAT for other people.
I think she's mad that I think part of it is that she thinks he's being annoying with the paternalism and do it the right way, yet he participated in not doing it the right way. I think that is part of her anger. I think there is also part of the anger that is she feels, I think it's actually driven by shame, which is she feels like she's out of the know and he catches her trying to take the exam, trying to cheat on the exam.
I totally agree with that, but and I feel like that shame is such a valid feeling and like that's got to be incredibly frustrating. And
it's not a valid reason to be mad at him.
But it's not a valid reason to be mad at Mike.
I agree with you.
Which is the debate.
Point. No, that's not the debate. The debate is why is she mad? That's why I framed it.
That is not the debate. The debate is, does Rachel have the right to be mad at Mike?
Yeah, and so I think she has the right to be mad at Mike for being paternalistic, especially in light of the fact that he is a fraudster.
But so he was being paternalistic throughout. We get no hint of the fact that she's mad at him. You say especially in light of the fact that he's being a fraudster.
I think that's an important fact.
Yeah, but it's not as though she was upset with him before and now it's amplified. There was no frustration about the paternalism, and then she's really mad.
Yeah, because she thinks he is contradicting his stance. Do it the right way. She thinks he is.
I don't even remember this "do it the right way" line from the episode, but
it was like, take your time, study for the exam, do the practice exams.
Yeah, he's trying to help her get a better.
He's trying to help her, but coming from a guy who cheated for other people, and
that's incredibly annoying.
It's incredibly annoying. I'd be mad.
I think though the fact that she doesn't seem to be mad about him helping her study until she finds out that he's cheating, I feel like there's so much more wrapped up in this conversation. I'm curious to see how it pans out on the next episode.
That's what I think too. I think ultimately one of us will be right.
Because if this is about the shame in large measure of like, you showed up, you had the audacity to like, then pretend like you just stumbled upon this meeting and again were dishonest about why you were in that part of town. I think that Mike did two things that I found annoying here.
Yes.
I think that he was generally paternalistic and just kind of a bit of a nerd about studying for the exam. It's like if she came to him and wanted help, that is such an altruistic thing. And he's spending his time and energy on something that can be, not always such a fun process.
Totally.
To tutor on an exam where you stand to benefit in no way.
Although he as we all know, likes to point to how freaking brilliant he is. So
Yeah.
it is scratching his back a little bit.
And two, he, I think whenever he inserts himself into Rachel trying to cheat on the exam and shows up and then tries to talk her into doing it the right way, it's a little bit annoying. No doubt about it. I'd be happy to argue this for the rest of the day with you, but
I would not.
If you knew Jared, you'd know that was a lie. But as I was watching, I felt like Rachel got mad because of the scandal of Mike cheating, something that she tried to do herself this very same day that she got mad at him for cheating. And I guess it didn't totally compute to me why she was upset here.
If you're right that she's only mad because she feels shame around him not just explicitly not telling her about the fact that he took the LSAT for people in the past,
and the shame around having tried to cheat and he found out about it.
Yeah, then I think you're right, and I'll concede this argument. If she's mad because he's trying to be paternalistic and he's effectively telling her, do it right, study hard, all that kind of stuff, steering her away from someone taking the LSAT for her, which I think is all admirable, except for the fact that he's on his high horse and he's used to be a cheater. I think that'd be kind of an annoying freaking thing to hear from him.
I totally agree that was an annoying thing, but the magnitude of the frustration here, it felt like it was potentially like a friendship ending thing.
Mansplaining Rachel's feelings.
I love how Jared's trying to hide behind this as if he's not doing the exact same thing. Yeah, so that wraps up episode 6 of season 1, Suits on Suits.
Is that officially halfway through?
We're halfway through.
Season 1.
Season 1. We are roughly 5% of the way through.
Thank God, we got so much more.
Yeah. All right, so that's episode 6, season 1, Suits on Suits. Looking forward to seeing everybody next week. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching, guys.